Hi, I'm Matthew Fontaine from Red River College. I'm a cross-connection control specialist, and today I'm going to walk you through testing a pressure vacuum breaker, or PVB, using a sight glass. So as always, first things you ever want to do is you want to notify, observe, identify the unit. So notify to make sure that the customer is aware that you're there to test the device, the water is going to be off temporarily. Identify the unit. You want to make sure that the model number and the serial number is the actual device that you want to test based on the test report sheet. And then you want to make sure and observe that everything is operational, everything is in function, everything is there. Okay. Once you've done all that, you're going to remove the poppet that's on the very top. So take the two screws off, remove the poppet. You want to inspect the top, make sure that everything is fine, there's not excessive water, it's not dripping. Then you want to bleed off the test cocks. So test cock number 1, we bleed off, test cock number 2. And then we're going to hook up our sight glass. So hooking up our sight glass, we require at least 28 inches of water column above the top of the air inlet valve. So in order to do that, I have to make sure that I have an abundance of tube because I require more than 1 psi to keep that closed. And it could be 2 psi, 3 psi, 4 psi in order to maintain it. So I want to create a high column of water to create that pressure that I need to try to keep that closed. I also have on here a little bleeder. So this is there so that I can slowly drain that water down and watch and maintain where that water level is once that air inlet actually opens. So we're going to hook that up to test cock number 2. We'll make sure that our little bleed valve is down closed. Leaving shutoff valve number 1 open, we are going to fill the sight glass using test cock number 2. I fill the sight tube up all the way to the very top. And then I'm going to take a tape measure and I'm going to measure 28 inches above my air inlet valve. So this way I have an idea of where that 1 psi marking is. So again, take my tape measure, 28 inches above. So as you can see, I am 8 inches above this white coupling. So I have approximately about another 18 inches above that, creating a couple psi. Hopefully that is enough pressure to keep my air inlet valve from opening up. So now I'm going to do that. I'm going to close shutoff valve number 1. I am going to open up test cock number 2. Test cock number 2 is now open, and my water level started to drop right away. My air inlet valve opened up, and as you can see, all the water in my tube is coming out of my air inlet valve. So my air inlet valve requires more than 2 psi G or 1.5 psi G to maintain it in the closed position. So I would say that my air inlet valve has actually passed. The next step that we want to do is we want to test check valve number 1. So I'm going to close test cock number 2. I'm going to take my whole assembly off. And I'm going to hook up my assembly to test cock number 1. Now, I don't require all that elevation and height to test 1 psi in direction of flow for check valve number 1, but I'm just going to leave it on there. And I'm going to open up test shutoff valve number 1 again. Okay. Now I'm going to slowly fill up my sight glass. Now remember, I only need 28 inches of water column above check valve number 1. So I have a fair amount of water in there right now. Let's double check to make sure that we are above 28 inches of water column. So again, my nice trusty tape measure. There's 28 inches of water column, and I am just above my rating plate on my pressure vacuum breaker. And you can see that I am basically just above 28 inches of water column. So I'm creating just over 1 psi in direction of flow, trying to force check valve number 1 open. So now, close shutoff valve number 1. I open up test cock number 2 to drain the water inside the body on the downstream side of check valve number 1. So I'm allowing air in, opening it up, draining the valve body. Check valve number 1 will now receive 28 inches of water column pressure, or 1 psi, in the direction of flow, trying to force that out. What I'm looking for is that water level to drop, and I'm also looking to make sure that water has stopped coming out of test cock number 2. So I'm not seeing any water coming out of test cock number 2. I'm not seeing any water coming out of my air inlet valve, and I'm not seeing my water table drop in my sight tube. I would wait my 2 minutes. Once my 2 minutes is up, I can then state that check valve number 1 on my pressure vacuum breaker is now complete. It has passed. Turn off check valve number, or test cock number 1. I can bleed out my sight glass. I can disengage it, and then the only thing I have left to do is actually hook up a pressure gauge to read my line pressure. So I grab my gauge, grab my hose, hook that up, bleed out any little air that could be in here. We're going to open up shutoff valve number 1, bleed out any air that's in the hose. And then I'm going to record what my line pressure is. So my line pressure on my pressure gauge is reading at roughly around 50 psig. I'd write that down on my test report, and we're good. To put the unit back into service, we turn off test cock number 2. We take off our hose. And then we want to bleed all the test cocks as well. So we're going to open up test cock number 1, bleed it out. Open up test cock number 2, bleed it out. And then we would open up shutoff valve number 2, and we put the unit back into service. From Red River College, I'm Matthew Fontaine.